thank you all for coming. It's really exciting for me to be here today, as last year I was helping this beautiful team to organize the first Ukraine Innovation Days, and we had a big ambition that year, and we called it annual. But for having something annual, you need to have at least the second year. So for me, seeing this continuity and seeing this dedication and seeing this high level of representation yesterday and today from politicians, policymakers, experts, local communities, something which really shows that not only Ukraine remains important here in the heart of US, but also the topic we are discussing, innovations and building Ukrainian today and future through innovations, is something which is really resonating to many people. So thank you for coming, and I'm really looking forward for our panel. Our panelists today, we will be discussing science, education, but even much more, because our topic is building Ukraine's future based on innovation. So it's really, really broad. So I'd like to start from introducing my colleagues, panelists, starting from Natalia Shapoval. Natalia is from Kyiv. She is chairwoman of KSE Institute, vice president for policy research at KSE, also member of advisory board of Center of Excellence in Procurement, member of editorial board of Vox Ukraine. Natalia also has master's degree in probability theory from Taras Shevchenko National University and master in economic analysis from KSE. So we are kind of alumni of one university. But also Natalia is a diplomat for Ukraine, working now all over the world, informing decision makers about data, which is really important for understanding what is going on. So Natalia Shapoval, thank you for coming. Anastasia Rozluska, also my Ukrainian friend who came here from Kyiv, traveling also several days as Natalia did. She's an expert from the Ukrainian Development Foundation and also project lead of Nazustrich at work.ua, the largest job search platform in Ukraine. Very important thing for you to know about Anastasia is that in 2022, when Russia invaded Ukraine at the full scale, she served as a paramedic with the Volunteer Medical Battalion Hospital years. I would like to thank Anastasia for doing that. And Anastasia also holds PhD in political science. Thank you for coming. The next person here is Nadia Crisan. Nadia has been an executive director of the Liechtenstein Institute of Self-Determination at Princeton University since 2020. Before that, Nadia served as a vice president of international government affairs at the major US law firm. Also, Nadia is a former diplomat who served in Washington for 4 years, focusing primarily on transatlantic security and economic policy matters. Nadia also is a foreign policy analyst and commentator with particular emphasis on Central and Eastern European affairs. Thank you for coming. And also my colleague here, Vaughan Turekian, who is executive director at the Policy and Global Affairs Division in the National Academy of Sciences of US. He has served as a fifth science and technology advisor at the State Department, advising on science and technology policy issues. Also, he was a chief international officer for the American Association for the Advancement of Science and founding director for the Center of Science Diplomacy. Vaughan holds a PhD in chemistry, and for us it's important, and we will discuss that he's also overseeing Ukraine-related work in the National Academies. So we are starting our great panel. Thank you for coming and joining this panel. From a broad discussion, you know, when we see news, for example, today from Kyiv, from Ukraine, and see these massive, brutal attacks every day, and people killed, civilian infrastructure targeted. Also, we are seeing permanently one of the targets is schools, hospitals, research institutions, and it's going on and on daily for more than 3 years. It's hard to talk about future, and it's challenging to talk about innovations, because these are things more about like positive, optimistic side. But also I would like during our panel today to see why it's important today and why it's essential for the next day, even for coming it for Ukraine. So Natalia, I would start from your remarks. I would be happy to hear, you know, some, as an economist, what is the basis, like real basis of the words we say, you know, human capital, education, science, they are crucial for Ukrainian economy, Ukrainian society and future. How do you see this? What is the evidence beyond these words?
Yes, thank you, Yulia. Indeed, our institute does a lot of macroeconomic analysis, and for economy, people, human capital, innovation is the key. And now, of course, there is this negotiation, like ceasefire, it might happen, might not happen, but Ukraine should be ready. There is this huge discussion about refugees coming back to Ukraine, how to achieve this positive spiral. And so, like our institute and many others also participate in this positive scenario planning as well as negative scenario planning. And for this bright Ukrainian future to have some kind of positive spiral that people really can come back, you need, promise of the investment, of economy growing, European integration. And if we try to model, simulate how this bright future can look like and how Ukraine can become like Poland or at least like Romania, then Ukraine needs like huge investment. And what's striking, but if you think about it, it's really going to be obvious. But we compare the productivity of Ukraine in agriculture, which is most simple sector. Ukraine would have like 10,000 like GDP divided by employed people, $10,000 a year. And in Poland, which is our like role model, 50,000. So the productivity and skills and automation and capabilities of people and how they work with the technology is really crucial, and this is what Ukraine should think of to get to the brighter future. But like also getting a little bit to the negative side is just think about it. So students who go to the first grade of school, they don't know yet how to write. And so during COVID, during the full-scale invasion, in different periods of time, you have like between 30, 50, in some periods of this time, even more percent of students studying online, including the first grade. So they don't know how to write to their teacher in this Viber, which is like very commonly used. It's so like what I'm trying to say is that the baseline scenario for Ukrainian human capital is very doomed. Like many years of the education are lost, and they cannot be like easily, this gap cannot be easily reached. And so this is really, really urgent, and thank you, Yulia, for like having this discussion today. So this is like human capital, innovation, capabilities of Ukraine are really existential. If you take Sumy region, which is like quite close to Russia, they cancel approximately 100 lessons a month out of 140 because of the sirens. Now there is recently newly introduced a scheme that would allow to have less cancelled lessons because of more granular sirens, but this is huge, and this gap, there is just no time to reach it. So the education and science from this macro perspective, it's huge. It's hugely important for people to come back, for Ukraine to have like future for these children who are spending 5th year already with this strange education, and for economy to have chances really to grow and at some 10 years or so to reach something similar to Europe today.
Thank you, Natalia. Thank you, Natalia. And we will come back to some practical ways how to do this. And now I want to turn to Anastasia and talk about this human capital issue, as a huge percent of Ukrainian society has already become veterans, or is becoming veterans, or will be becoming veterans. We understand this is a very special group, which is a huge, huge part of society and crucial part of the society, right? With special experience, with special understanding, and with very special right, to be the leading part of the society. So how you see from your work and expertise, including this big part and transformations needed for that?
Okay, Yulia, thank you for this question. And today we are talking about innovation, and I will talk a bit about innovation as ability to change approaches. For me now, innovations, it's a process of rethinking the usual practices. And that is, means that all system in this new world, in our new world, don't work enough good. And why the return of veterans to civilian life for my country, for me, is very important. And one side, and for the other side, it's about one of the most difficult challenges. Today, we are talking about Ukraine like a country of warriors that must defeat enemy. Tomorrow, we will talk about us as a country about builder. And veterans will be included in this process. We are already becoming a country of veterans. And according to Ministry of Veterans, in the end of the war, we will have 5 million people involved in veteran politics. It will be people with unique experience, deep motivation, and returning to civilian life after frontline, it doesn't mean only to change a career. It's about personal and society transformation. And even now, we don't have ready-made answers for this. But we can learn from others, and we can make our own Ukrainian model, because we have unique situations, you know. And even now, we're doing this together, civil society, businesses, government. We try to do this together. And we need rethinking everywhere. In building, in education, in working, and society. And for me, it's very important to understand new roles in society, where veterans not only a person who return life, but veteran becomes a leader of change in community, in businesses, in civil society, and also in the state, in government. And here we should talk about change the focus, because innovation in this plan is, don't ask how can we help a veteran adapt. We should ask, what should we change in the education, recruitment, management, so that the veteran find their place after services? Now we have many good examples about it. But veterans, we have now, even now, we have veterans in technology projects, in logistics, security, management, government, civil society, and it's just the beginning. For example, in my work at company WorkQA, it's one of the biggest job search sites in Ukraine. We made project Nazustrich. It means in English toward. And it's a meeting place for employers and veterans. Employers post jobs where military experience in an advantage. And veterans can upload their CV and find projects that help them find work. We already have more than 5,000 more than 5,000 job offers and 7,500 veterans CVs. This platform had only 2 months. But for us, it's not enough. We need more. We need more job offering from companies that give preference to professionals with military experience. This will show their value in the job market. And it's a great process, but it's not enough for us. We need more. We need more because we are talking about system. Now I wanted to tell about that we have a lot of different initiatives from government, companies, civil society, and for this, for everyone, we need system. And system build, it's not easy, you know. And at the same time, you also need to change culture. For this, we need to work together with institutions and work systematically. The change culture, it means a culture of how we see veterans, how we work with them, the culture of prospection and interaction, and also a culture of real gratitude, not only formal thank you, but giving space for a new life. When we do this, we will be a real new country with huge future, I hope. But we should fight for this.
Thank you, Anastasia. Vaughan, I will turn now to you, to Vaughan at first, yes, because I want, like we started from education, human capital, now inclusion of veterans, and I want to talk about science and innovation at first, and then with Nadia we will proceed where we can get money for all of that. But with you, I would like to talk about, with these ongoing discussions now, negotiations, a lot of geopolitical dynamics, a lot of things ongoing inside Ukraine, but also outside Ukraine, how you see the role of science and innovation going forward? Is it becoming more important, less important, crucial, and where?
Well, thank you, Yulia, and it's a real pleasure to join the panelists, even if I sort of seem to run on here right in just-in-time delivery. I come from a place called the National Academy of Sciences, so it'd be very hard for me to say, no, science isn't the future. I mean, it's sort of built into who we are, but it's an interesting story about the creation of our organization. And I think in thinking about the creation of our organization, it gives some context for how even Ukraine thinks about science. So the National Academy of Sciences in the United States was created in 1863. And in 1863, the United States was in the middle of a civil war. It was not clear what was going to happen with the nation. It just wasn't. It was a nation torn north and south, but more than just that. It wasn't just geographical. It was much more broadly driven. At that time, President Lincoln, actually throughout the period of the Civil War, did three things, and three things that I think spoke to both the present circumstance that he was going through, but always the eye on the future. And the three major things that we always think about are, number one, he created something called the land-grant college and university system. He created within the United States an ability for universities to be places of both research, training, but also of explaining and transmitting knowledge into the very people that had to go sow the fields and harvest the crops, taking what was learned to being taught to being applied. That was one. Number two, he created the organization I mentioned before, the National Academy of Sciences. The National Academy of Sciences was built as a place to advise the nation in the growing areas of science and the arts at that point really meant technology, in 1863, that would be critical to advancing not only the war effort at present, but the future of the nation going forward. And third, he invested heavily and signed the bill that created the Transcontinental Railroad, a major infrastructure project that in the middle of a war seemed almost aspirational, that you would somehow think about a train bringing a country together while all the forces are tearing it apart. So when you look at what leadership means, it means actually not only envisioning the present, but anticipating a future and putting those investments into that future that will be critical. And so from some place called the National Academy of Sciences, that was created in a period of conflict by somebody who was visionary, it was very clear that that recognition that science, education, technology, and infrastructure were all going to be critical for the nation as it existed and the nation that it would become. And there were a lot of hiccups along the way, but it was still embedded in that vision. And so when you think about Ukraine and science and education and workforce and all of those investments, yes, they do resonate today, and we hear about this in the news and everyone, drones and everything else, but they're not just kept to today. They're built around the three titles, which I see on that board, which I can no longer see because that gentleman's standing in the middle of them, but reinvent, innovate, and leapfrog. And you cannot do any of those three without underpinning an investment in science and education.
Thank you, Vaughan. Totally agree. And I think as we are sitting here and discussing it, it's totally clear we all agree on that. But the question is around investments. So, Nadia, my question to you is, given all the complexity and scale of the need in Ukraine and complexity of the things we are now discussing, how you can envision building, infrastructure of investments, working with international partners in these very challenging, again, geopolitical times to get resources, to get this power into the system to enable all these transformations?
Thank you, Yulia, and thank you all for being here. So I'm not an investment banker. I'm a professor of practice at Princeton, but I do have some experience with the field, although I teach geopolitics. So to answer your question on, is funding the number one asset you need to have for innovation and research? I would say funding and human capital. So if Ukraine has the human capital, whether it's in Ukraine or outside of Ukraine, and many of them unfortunately had to leave, we hosted 15 Ukrainians at Princeton right after the war. Our president was really pioneering, and we brought 15 Ukrainians, 5 Russians who were at risk were they to remain in Russia, even for a day or two. We wanted to bring them to campus for 2 years and continue their academic research. But that is term limited, it's 2 years, and then they had to carry on with other opportunities. And none of them was STEM. So hugely important. Institutions like Princeton work from the grassroots. It's the faculty who will go to the provost or the president and say, I want to bring 5 Ukrainian scholars. This is my lab. This is what they're going to do. And this is how I'm going to pay for it. That's how it works. It's just a very entrepreneurial institution. It's not dependent on tuition. It's working in a very different manner. So now coming to funding. Obviously, as the United States built South Korea, the European Union is the principal player for Ukraine. It's their go-to. That's to me their number one partner. And this program Horizon, which they now have an office in Ukraine, it's been there for over a year. They have consortia. That's probably the number 1-2 funding source in a structured way, in a measurable way, in a consistent way. And it's beyond defense, because if you look at innovation in defense, probably Ukraine is number 1 today with support significantly clearly from the United States. But what's beyond defense? And we understand that you can't even get to armistice without continuing to survive every day. You were telling us about your 7-year-old who was crying all night because there was a 6-hour shelling all night, right? So how do you go beyond the defense innovation? I would say number 1 should be Horizon. Now, very important for our American friends, Horizon is EU, but it's not EU only. America can participate with funding, Princeton can participate, other donors can participate, as long as they agree on IP, which is our biggest issue all the time, right? Taiwan, a big partner for Ukraine, can participate. South Korea, everybody can participate to the extent they are committed. And I think that's the main issue here. So the Horizon program applies all over in Europe. Ukraine, because of the war situation, has a significant discount. I mean, they barely contribute, which is, to certain countries, to their unlike. They don't really like that Ukraine gets a 90% discount when they actually have to contribute that 90%. But anyway, it's a different story. We're in a situation of war, so it's exceptionalism here at work. So I would say number one is funding through the European Union, but continue a parallel path with the United States and Canada. Number two, leadership. To me, none of this funding without a serious organization that coordinates this entire effort. And I don't know if it's the Ministry of Education, I'm not a politician in Ukraine, but whoever has the capability and the trust of the people that these are going to be in sync and efforts are not parallel and money are not lost and labs are working despite the shelling. Courses are taking place online or not taking place. But what's happening with the labs? I mean, at Princeton, if you go right now, you see 1,000 scientists in their labs. Can you see 100 in Ukraine? And if so, how do they work? And what's their return plan? And what do you do with the diaspora? Are they going for the summer to at least do some engagement? Is teaching happening online through faculty, folks who left and are not able to physically go back? So those are, to me, the fundamental questions.
Thank you, Nadia, and I think these suggestions are very good, and a lot of Ukrainian researchers, despite of everyday shelling and all the damage they are having and psychological state, they are trying to get competitive funding from instruments like Horizon and others. They are engaging into multilateral cooperations for different instruments, and the question is, I think the sustainability of effort is really very limited by what Russia is doing. So the question is like how we can compete in these circumstances. But these are systemic instruments which can provide a long-term, at least, direction. Okay, now we are turning to the second our circle. We will have several minutes for you each for reply for this question and maybe also some final, focus you want to bring into audience. And I wanted to ask you, Natalia, you mentioned, on the macro level how the things work and why human capital is important. But on the example of Kyiv, KSE, shouldn't say, but I will say actually, KSE earlier when I was there was Kyiv School of Economics, and when I started my master there, it was I think the first non-economical program in public policy and governance, but it was still a lot of economics there. Now in 2025, it's a Kyiv School of Everything, as you joke, right? It's KSE. Because you extended a lot. I want to understand, underlying strategy, what you are doing and why you are doing.
Yeah, thank you. We now have 1,100 of students. And those who know KSE, it was like very boutique school, like 60 students a year. And now we want to be universal. And we don't want to be, above anything. So we are doing engineering education, mathematics. We are right now opening the program for professional education, like for welders, for electricians, for operators of CNC machines. And we want to broaden this as well. We're trying to be, I think, the prototype so that you look at KSE and say, yeah, this is how the future should look like. And I hope our students feel like this because, there are all this drama. They have the sirens. They are like our analysts, for example, who are students and who work at KSE. Some of them have their father who is the defender of the Azovstal. He's still in Russia. Another student, they from Donetsk, their family is still there. And everyone is a little bit like this, but the homework should be submitted before the deadline. Air alert, no air alert, there is no. And so this creates this kind of world where people can care about the talent. And I think this is very important. Some other things that we are doing include the small scholarships for talented people. And one of the most recent scholarship, it's $5,000 or something, which shows that it can be quite, affordable thing to do. went to the engineer from Rozluska. Is Aero Intelligence. It's like NGO, but also a brigade. So they are one of the first who started operating drones for surveillance. And they are like one of other brigades as well who are on the frontier of the innovation and basically of the society, of the economy. And their engineer received this like scholarship from KSC. So we wanna like celebrate the talent. I was surprised that we now have 150 these talents, like mathematicians, engineers, like from army, not from army. And I think this is what we believe in, that there is like behind all this policy, everything collective, public sector, there is this individual with a talent who either develops it or not, and either creates this upgrade to drone or not. And this is what we believe in. And you also said that I can like make some focus what's important. It's irrelevant to what I was saying before, but I just want to say this. So when I interact with the brigades and what we call veterans, in Ukraine right now we don't call veterans. The term officially is participant of the military action. And so the question is not how I feel it. How Ukrainian society who didn't go to the war would be inclusive to them, but is how the participant of the military action and these brigades are inclusive to us who didn't like go to the war. These are very capable people. Not all brigades are like this, but some are like this. They are like fundraising, recruiting, innovating. They're taking this like bad drone, upgrading it, testing it, like taking a super cool weapon from US sophisticated company and like actually testing, upgrading, giving feedback. And they are super capable, and they are driving the economy. They are really the ones who are doing the innovation. And yeah, I think the future gonna be like, if we don't screw up, gonna be like this, and they're gonna drive the economy as well. Thanks.
Thank you, Natalia. It's a good moment to turn to my question to you, Anastasia. As Natalia mentioned, and you talked before, for veterans or participants of military operations, how the education system in broad terms should transform, adapt? What are the changes you envision, which are needed for making right thing?
Thank you. You remember I told about change the culture. We should change the culture through education, work, and trust. And education in this way, it's like bridge between military and civilian life. It's not only about learning or knowledge, it's much more about opportunity and way to return. And main question, it's not about who were you before the war or on the war, but who do you want to be after service? And I would like to make several emphases in this way. First, that veterans need different opportunities in education. Why? Because veterans are not the same. Some veterans return from leave army because of injury, some because of age, and some because of family reasons. Some had jobs before the war, some didn't. Some have businesses, some didn't. Others went to war right after school. And who is veterans in Ukraine? It's our brothers, sisters, it's our colleagues. We work together before the big war started. Yesterday there were IT specialists. Today they are machine gunners or drone operators. They will get military skills. However, this should not decide their future. We're talking about combat experience and military experience, but it's very important to understand on the job market what this means. But it's not, it can be describe your future. It's only like one part, your past. You was before IT specialist, after this you were operator drones, but today I want to be teacher, and it's okay. And we have, I think we have very good expression in Ukraine, nothing for veterans without veterans. Their experience skills are important in civilian life. We must learn about military jobs and connect them to the job market. And now we're making this project with with Ministry of Veterans together. We like make translation, combat skills to civilian language. Second, education is about support and respect. It's not only about learning. We veterans need places where when they can feel safe and respected. We already have good examples. Veterans now, for example, we prepared veterans like career advisor, and they and they teach others to how to find job, where it's much more correct, where you can find job or where you can learn your where you can change your profession. And some veterans very often go to the school and kindergarten and talking with children. And this changes how we see veterans, not just as soldier, but like a people who teach, build, and lead. It's change also focus. And we also should understand that when we're talking about education for veterans, we should talking about education for civil society, for HR, for a job market. They should understand what this mean military profession, combat experience, because it should be this like towards to each other. And third, that is also very important, that education is investment. Many veterans are professional and business owners, and now we have data that more than 70% veterans now wanted to be business owner and create new businesses. I don't know answer these questions why, but we have this number. They have special experience. They need education now, not tomorrow. It's not only about them, about veterans, but it's much more about whole of economy too. That's why we need cooperation. Because now our problems that we have many initiatives even in ministries. For example, Minister of Veterans House their initiatives, Minister of Health theirs, and it's for veterans it's very difficult to find this. It's like work the small projects. And I know that now military of veterans make special app in Dia, and we will have Dia for veterans. And I think we should get full help from the system, not only small projects. So education must give the real choices, support, and a change to grow. We must respect the past, their past, and believe in their future.
Thank you, Anastasia. It's it's great to hear that things are happening already, and these transformations, including digital services, but also, transformation of education approach and culture is ongoing. I think this is one of the social innovations which we do not have somewhere written in the book. This is something we need to invent as a society, and I hope it will be, something we all do together. Vaughan, my question to you. A year ago, at the first Ukraine Innovation Days here, during the opening session, President of National Academy of Sciences of US, Marsha McNutt, together with the Prime Minister of Ukraine, Denis Shmyhal, here announced Science and Innovation Fund for Ukraine, based in the academies. So it's a year later on. What is the situation? What is the plan? And how it's also adapting to the transformations around?
Yeah, so thanks, Julia. In that year, since that was announced, we did something very important, which I think has made probably the biggest advance in this fund, is we hired Yulia to run it. So any questions you have, you can go to her. But in reality, really over the last year, what we've done is I think with a lot of Yulia's leadership, spent a lot of time listening and going around and really coming in and saying, if we start with the premise that small investments that are well targeted, that leverage other either experiences, expertise, or funds, can actually demonstrate sort of a path forward, then that fund that we can put in place can be flexible and adaptable to do some good in a very sort of rapid time frame. And so really over the last year, and I see my colleague Kathy Campbell here, who's been a big sort of thought leader in this as well, we spent a lot of time thinking about where we could best utilize this fund. And, it's not a huge fund. It's a fund that's really designed to help bridge. And I think your point about the Europeans is very interesting. But in that context, when we talk to the Europeans, even as they're getting going, that time frame is slightly out for years in some of the funding. So what can we do with a little bit more flexible funding early on to help maybe get the system primed moving forward? So we've spent, like I said, a lot of time talking to our colleagues in Ukraine. Yulia and I and Kathy were in Lviv and Kyiv, I think last August it was definitely a few months ago, talking to different stakeholders. We've talked to many people that have been involved in different programs and projects in Ukraine, not just on the US side and on the Ukrainian side, but in other parts of Europe, in the UK, and other places, to see what they're doing, to see how we can best put this fund to purpose. The purpose of the fund really is to bridge that issue of science and innovation. One of the things that we noticed from some of our earlier work was these tended to be conversations that were happening in parallel. Some of the science conversation was happening here, and some of the sort of the innovation and economic sort of recovery was happening here. So really over the last year, we've been trying to bring together those communities more and more. And we're fortunate we have access to not only a very sizable number of people in the science community in the US, but a number of people that are in sort of the tech space, particularly in the Silicon Valley environment. So trying to bring all these communities together to see how to best deploy the funding, think about how we develop the criteria, and then getting going and thinking about it as a scientist would, experimenting, putting stuff out there, seeing what's working, seeing what's not working, and not that it's going to be for the long term for us to do, but really maybe a pathway for others to then follow in with some of the best practices.
Thank you, Vaughan. And with this about coordination and leveraging efforts of others, there is another big event which is happening annually, which is Ukrainian Recovery Conference. And last year we've had for the first time separate panel on science and innovation and conversation there, exactly how we are bridging this to all the needs in Ukraine current and recovery related and economic development related. And this year, hopefully, there will also be this conversation. But also, we've held a meeting recently in Europe. And when we were discussing through different people from different countries who are trying to help Ukrainian science and innovation and education system, we all understand how coordination is challenging, you know. The idea of leveraging is great because no one has resources enough to cover the need. Also, it's challenging for Ukrainian, as you told them, like maybe ministry, maybe government, maybe other actors to coordinate this external plethora of partners. So it's very non-trivial how to do this. And I know this year in Ukraine Recovery Conference, there will be again discussion like how we can coordinate better. So Nadia, from your experience in geopolitics and international policy, what would be your thoughts and maybe advice on to how better do this coordination and to implementing this idea of leveraging resources, expertises all over the world in order to help Ukrainians who are building these transformations in Ukraine to succeed?
Thank you. So I think Ukraine has done a phenomenal job in raising awareness of the difficulty and the resilience they have had and really being a global diplomat. I mean, your president was in Saudi Arabia, in the UAE, not to mention being in Europe every day, all day, when he's not in Ukraine. And I do agree with you that the Europeans work on a budgetary cycle of 5 to 7 years. It's a little different than in the United States. But if you have a fund in the United States, one recommendation would be to work with people who care about Ukraine. We have a pretty well-known and respected Princeton alum, Eric Schmidt, who used to run Google. He cares a lot about Ukraine, and he's not invested only in drones and technology and defense. I think he could be very well invested in something else, and I don't speak for Eric Schmidt here today, but I think what's important is to think about the mindset. He's a businessman. He needs to know who's going to do what and how. And if Ukraine has a strategic vision to say, we're going to invest in 3 different sectors, 2 of them being energy security, agriculture, or food security, and the third you choose whether it's IT or nuclear. In the United States, we care about nuclear quite a bit. You probably care about this too, given your neighbor. So having those conversations with donors who move fast, they don't move on EU terms. The EU is a long term. This is Ukraine's only, let's call it 911, the accession to the European Union. Everything else, it's a nice gift, okay? So if you want to be part of that club, you want to dance with that club. Everything else from the United States, it's super important, but it needs to be strategic. You can't do everything. You need to do 100% 3 things, and that's it. And there needs to be trust on has the person who's running that has any business experience. You talk about 70% of veterans wanting to do business. Who's guiding those people? Who's telling them these are the 3 sectors we are going to bring funding to from people like the ones I just mentioned? Otherwise, they're going to go their own way. There's going to be no scale, no access to markets. Even the EU is saying, well, on one side, but on the other side, we're not going to let you bring your grain here. So to me, it's a question of that coordinator to be trusted, to be agile, and to have the experience. It can't be somebody who's been in government for 20 years. I'm sorry to say this.
Thank you, Nadia. And I hope the discussion we are having here will be contributing, to other conversations which are happening in different places and also at URC, as we see this event as a part of this thinking process, all over the world, how to better do this coordination and joint work. I wanted to say that, having these stories told, especially from Ukraine, and the things international community is doing to support these initiatives in Ukraine, it's absolutely clear that Russia doesn't and won't succeed in preventing Ukraine from innovation and building a future we will want to build, we will decide to build. But I think it's really crucial to support the initiatives inside Ukraine and great people who are willing to do things and seeing the way how they will do, because they own this land, they own this now and this future. And having expert advice and having resources and having friends and partners outside who can provide energy, resources, stability, and sometimes just friendly, hand, is something which is very important. We also have here, except for this panel and other panels which will be happening here, we have exhibitions, and one of these exhibitions is also related to human capital and science. It's an exhibition, Freedom in the Question, created by Science at Risk and hosted by Ukraine House here, and it tells the story that Russia, on the one hand, is killing Ukrainian intelligent, bright people for like at least 100 years. You will see there stories of researchers who were killed during the Soviet Union only because they were researchers. They were removed from the system, put somewhere in Siberia, for example, just to prevent them to be prominent Ukrainian people and prevent Ukraine of being internationally represented. That's why sometimes when we have this question, like where Ukrainian Nobel laureates, this is the answer there in that exhibition, where they are. They've been killed years by years, generation by generation. On the other hand, when you are seeing all these innovations and you are saying, wow, Ukraine is fighting so, drones, technology, social innovation, so many things are going on. In universities are being built, things are being scaled up. These people do this again and again. And Russia does their bad work again and again of killing these people, ruining infrastructure and trying to prevent us from this future. And Ukrainians are doing this again and again at the scale we can. So just imagine when we all will, win Ukraine's future from Russia, how brilliant this country be and how a great partner, what a great partner it will be for all democratic countries all over the world, and of course for the US, also in science, innovation, education domain. Thank you very much. Thank you, my panelists, and have a great day today. And please come to the exhibition.